The Cleveland Browns are suddenly being talked about in a completely different way around the league, and honestly, it feels like the tone surrounding this franchise has shifted harder than it has in years. National analysts who usually overlook Cleveland are now openly discussing the possibility of a major turnaround in 2026, and it all starts with one simple reality. This roster looks dramatically different from the one that limped through a 5-win season. Ian Rapoport recently pointed directly at the Browns as a team capable of going from last to first in the AFC North if they can get stable quarterback play, and hearing that kind of statement attached to Cleveland is not something fans are used to, especially considering how brutal the perception around this organization has been over the last few seasons. But now, analysts are looking at the off-season moves, the schedule, the coaching changes, and the draft class, and they're starting to believe this team may actually be positioned for a legitimate jump. And when you really break down what happened this offseason, you can understand why the conversation is changing. The Browns completely attacked their biggest weaknesses instead of pretending those issues didn't exist. Last season, the offensive line struggled badly, the wide receiver room lacked explosiveness, and the offense as a whole looked stuck in mud. Cleveland responded by practically rebuilding the offense from the ground up. The offensive line alone could feature 5 new starters compared to last year's unit. And that is massive. The additions of Titus Howard, Zion Johnson, and Elton Jenkins completely reshaped the identity of the front line, while rookie Spencer Fano arrives with expectations of becoming an immediate cornerstone at tackle after being selected 9th overall. There's also depth being added with Austin Barber and Parker Brailsford, players the Browns clearly believe can become valuable pieces moving forward. The organization understood they could not keep asking quarterbacks to survive behind one of the worst offensive lines in football. But the draft is really where people around the league started paying attention. Todd McShay openly admitted he hasn't felt this optimistic about Cleveland coming out of a draft in a very long time, and it's easy to see why. The Browns walked away with multiple players many evaluators viewed as first-round talents. Casey Concepcion brings explosive ability after the catch, while Denzel Boston gives Cleveland the size and reliable hands this offense desperately needed on the outside. Emmanuel McNeil was another selection receiving major praise, and suddenly the Browns' receiver room no longer looks like one of the weakest groups in the NFL. That's the part that should excite fans the most. For the first time in a while, there's an actual vision here. These moves aren't random. The Browns are building an offense designed to function differently than it did before. Todd Monken stepping into the picture changes the entire personality of the attack. His background with Baltimore showed his ability to maximize offensive flexibility, use tight ends creatively, and adapt to personnel strengths. Cleveland clearly wants to become more physical, more creative, and far less predictable. And speaking of tight ends, the Browns added multiple players at that position as well, including Joe Royer and Carson Ryan. There's also a clear emphasis on bringing back elements of old-school football with heavier formations, fullbacks, and versatile offensive packages. This isn't about trying to become the flashiest offense in the NFL. It's about building something sustainable that can survive tough AFC North football in December and January. Then there's the schedule. Cleveland enters 2026 with what many believe is the easiest schedule in the league, and history says that matters more than people realize. AFC teams with the easiest strength of schedule have finished with winning records for 8 straight seasons. The Patriots and Broncos both benefited from favorable schedules recently and made dramatic jumps in the standings. Analysts are now wondering if Cleveland could be next in line to take advantage of that same opportunity. Of course, none of this matters if the quarterback position collapses again. That's still the giant question hanging over everything. Deshaun Watson remains the biggest uncertainty on the roster, because Browns fans have already seen how quickly things fall apart when the offensive line struggles and Watson holds onto the football too long. There's still skepticism, and understandably so. But there's also growing discussion about whether Shedeur could eventually become the more realistic option if Cleveland wants a fresh direction under center. What makes that conversation interesting is that many people inside the Browns community believe Shedeur never truly had a fair environment to succeed previously. Injuries, drops, inconsistent coaching, and poor play calling constantly worked against him. Now, with a rebuilt supporting cast and a more experienced offensive system, some believe this could finally be the year where the Browns discover what they actually have at quarterback. And honestly, that's what makes this season feel different from previous years. There's finally legitimate intrigue surrounding the future of this team instead of pure frustration. The defense is already respected. The offensive line has been rebuilt, the receiver room suddenly has upside, and the coaching staff feels far more aligned with the direction of the roster. Cleveland may not be a finished product yet, but for the first time in a long time, people outside the fan base are beginning to believe the Browns are heading somewhere meaningful. So now the big question becomes this. If everything clicks together the way analysts are predicting, how many wins do you honestly think this Browns team can reach in 2026? And who is the one player you're most excited to watch this season? Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and turn on notifications so you never miss breaking Cleveland Browns news. And don't forget to tell me your thoughts down in the comments because Browns fans are going to have a lot to say about this upcoming season.